So this is FileFlow. This is an extension that I just built for VSCode to help scratch a little itch that I have, where I want to be able to quickly navigate between files back and forth in order to help me present them in a live coding environment. You can install it through the extension marketplace by searching for FileFlow and selecting it and installing it just like any other extension. But let me show you a little bit about how it works. You see here I've got a directory full of different files. I'm going to go to the first file in this directory and open my command palette and search for this go to next file command from FileFlow. If I run this command, what it will do is it'll automatically open up the next file in the directory for me. And if I run that same command again, it will go to the next file again. I can also go back and forth, but one of the great things is I can also set up keyboard shortcuts. You can see here I've set up some keyboard shortcuts for me to go to the next and previous file, so that if I use those shortcuts, I can just go back and forth without having to waste time opening up the command palette. You'll see here, if I go forward to this Markdown file, by default, VS Code is just going to open the regular text editor view that you see. But we can go into our settings and search for FileFlow, and we'll see there's a preview setting here. We can decide what files should actually show in the preview mode. By default, files won't show in preview mode. They'll only ever show up in the regular text editor. But you can try and preview all files if you want, or you can preview a custom list of file extensions. So by default, Markdown and HTML files are set up to work like this. So if I come back here again, and I try and open up the next file, which is the Markdown one, now I'm not getting the text editor, I'm getting this full rich rendered Markdown view. And for Markdown that might not be super impressive, but it also works with HTML files, which is absolutely great because you get to build these really rich, great looking title screens as you want, using whatever you want, basically. Because at the end of the day, this file is just an HTML file. It's just got some inline CSS and some HTML to do things. But this is kind of a dumb way of building it. If you really wanted to, you could import a CSS library like Tailwind or Bootstrap. You could import some JavaScript. You could basically just build an HTML file here, which is one of the really big advantages of VS Code because it runs in Electron, but that basically means it's just a web browser. You can use all the kind of web browser technologies you want to build your slides and get all the benefits of being able to view your code in line as well. So there's a couple of other settings here. You'll also notice we've got this out of bounds behavior. By default, it does nothing. And what this means is that when you get to the last file in a directory and you run that go to next command again, what it's going to do is nothing. It's not going to open another file because there is no other file for it to open. But if you enable the loop current folder setting and you do this, it's actually going to loop back to the first file in the directory. So you'll go from 4.html to 1.txt, which is a pretty great way if you wanted to go back and forth between something and being able to navigate nicely. But the more interesting setting here for me is this go to next folder command. Now if I enable that and I go to the subfolders here, you see I've got a bunch of different folders with different chapters. If I go to this first file and I run the command again to go to the next file, it's going to go to the next file like you might expect. But when we get to the end of this list and we get to that out of bounds area, and I run it again, what it's going to do is open the first file in the next directory down. That's pretty great because you get to organize your code however you want to present it. You can split it up into different files. It doesn't need to be complex at all. And I want to give you a bit of a more realistic example of how I might be using this extension now. You see here I've got 6 different files enabled, 6 different files that I've built out ahead of time. And I've started off with this first one. You can see I'm building a PHP file. If I go to the next file, you see I've incrementally added this next little bit. I've added a function called foo, And in the next file, I've added the parameter and return type that I want. In the next one, I've added just the return value. In the next one, I've added a var dump. In the next one, I've shown what the results of that var dump might be in line. And all of this is pretty great because I can come in here if I want to. I can edit some of the code. I can even use something like the run code command using the code runner extension in order to evaluate this and see the results really as they're evaluated instead of just showing them in line here. So being able to do something like this is pretty great on its own, but it's even better if you want a really clean presentation, because VSCode recently came out with an option to hide editor tabs, which gets rid of that. Then you can also hide your sidebar as well, and you end up with this beautifully clean presentation where you can go back and forth between things. You can show yourself adding all this code without having all this other clutter in the way. You can just focus on the code that you're writing and presenting it beautifully.